So tonight we welcome Rick Wilson, a top Republican political strategist, ad man, and writer, and his new book, Running Against the Devil, a plot to save America from Trump and the Democrats from themselves. Rick lays out a witty, no-holds-barred roadmap to how to dump Trump. His new book builds on his 2018 New York Times #1 bestseller, Everything Trump Touches Dies. Rick puts forth a strategy to persuade alienated Republicans and independent Democrats who voted for Trump in 2016 to change their votes. Rick believes Democrats should undermine Trump's efforts to control America's political narrative with a case that argues our 45th president is a mentally and morally unwell man. Being married to Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, I take a great interest in politics. I read this book over the weekend, and I was absolutely mesmerized by it. Rick's ideas are important to the debate of how to retire a dangerous Donald Trump in 2020. We have liberal pundit Molly Jong Fast alongside him tonight. As the daughter of writers Erica Jong and Jonathan Fast and the granddaughter of Howard Fast, she comes from deep literary roots. She's the editor-at-large at the Daily Beast and the author of 2 novels, The Social Climber's Handbook, and we have Normal Girl, and also the writer of a memoir, Girl Maladjusted. We're so glad to have her books here tonight along with Rick's. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Rick and Molly to the Strand Bookstore. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that.
They're not going to let mine be on. That's going to be the trick, is I can ask him anything, but no one can hear me.
I kind of like that.
Thank you. So we had a long discussion, and we have very planned out questions. I wrote them all down. No, I'm just kidding. I was like, Rick, what should I ask you? We got to like regime change in China. No, we're not going to talk about that. Not this time. So I was hoping we could start by talking about why should people listen to you? Like, why now?
Well, because for about 30 years of my very long career in this business, I was the guy that wrecked progressive and liberal dreams all over the place. And I was one of those guys that built a very sophisticated, very complete machine to go out and win for Republicans who did not ideologically or socially match people terribly well in purple and blue states. I mean, hell, I helped elect a Republican governor in Vermont 4 times. So process that for a second. Vermont. I will say that I also helped elect a certain guy named Rudy Giuliani here as mayor in 1997 before he became literally the craziest person I know in America now. But the reason I think that I hope that Democrats will listen and read this book is that we face something so much bigger than my former party and my former ideological preferences and predicates. We face an existential threat to this country from a president who has taken on the mantle of power and abused it in ways that are a proximate threat to this country. And we may not survive another 4 years of this guy. And I don't say that with any sense of exaggeration. I say that with a sense of very cold realization about what he is doing, both on the surface and below the surface in Washington, to corrupt and destroy this country.
Wait, I want to know what's wrong with Rudy Giuliani. Can I ask that, or is that I'm not supposed to ask that, right? Can we just for a minute? What is wrong with Rudy Giuliani?
So let me say this. When I came to work for Rudy in 1997, he was running for re-election as mayor. And the man I met then had some very rough edges, but basically, my theory of the case even then was that Rudy was Batman. And sometimes you hate Batman's methods, but you kind of needed a Batman figure once in a while. You got to bring him out of the cave once in a while to do the tough job. And I will never not be grateful that on 9/11 he did something for this country at a moment when everyone was desperate for some sense of guidance and stability in that one press conference. And if he'd stopped right then, they would name high schools after this guy until the sun cooled. He would be viewed as somebody who took a civic moment and showed real leadership. But now what are they going to remember? Kooky Rudy on Fox News ranting about conspiracy theories and the Ukraine and all this absolutely edge case weirdness that he has sunk himself into. And while there are a number of theories about Rudy, why he's doing this, I happen to personally believe that a very significant factor in it is that Donald Trump's influence finds the worst aspect of every human being around him, finds the darkest, most sick part of any human being around him, and ruthlessly exploits it. Because I can tell you, when I worked for Rudy, Donald Trump was basically a figure of mockery. He was a guy that, so I was on the campaign first, then I was in City Hall as an senior advisor to the mayor, whatever the title was. I was one of those guys. Donald Trump was basically a guy you'd throw a couple extra parking passes to. But nobody was thinking, hey, yeah, we better listen to what Donald Trump says on consequential policy matters. No one ever thought that. I will also confess to something now.
Yes. Let's go.
That and I will never say where she's buried, but no, this is a different story. I will confess to something now. That piece of video you've seen with Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani in drag, I filmed that.
Yeah, will you just tell a little bit of the backstory for that, please? I don't think we can.
If I keep talking about it, I'm going to be haunted by nightmares and PTSD, post-Trump stress disorder.
That's right.
It was for the Inner Circle, which is the press association annual dinner here, and we filmed it as kind of a lark at first. And I was like, he really likes drag, because it was like the third time that one of his friends was like, no, he wants to do the Rudia character again. I'm like, does he? I mean, no hate, but he seems to be. Yeah. Anyway.
All right. So how can Democrats beat Donald Trump?
Well, there are three things you got to really think about in the national campaign. Number one, hard fact. A lot of Democrats don't like this fact. The Electoral College is the only game in town. Whether you love it or hate it, this year, it's still there. And if your plans don't include winning in 15 or so swing states, you're not having a real campaign. If your candidate is going to California for any reason other than to take giant sacks of cash, you're not running a real campaign. If you're thinking that anybody who says it's a 50-state campaign, no, it is not. You know how California is going to vote. You know how Mississippi is going to vote. You know how North Dakota is going to vote. You know how Oregon is going to vote. Those are done. They're in the bag, for better or for worse. Extra voter turnout in those places means nothing. Every single warm body, every single door knocker, every pair of boots on the ground needs to be in a place like Florida or Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania or Ohio or Virginia even. Virginia is not as blue as you think quite yet, or North Carolina. They've got to fight this fight where the fight is taking place. And if they don't, they're going to wake up on Election Day with the Hillary Clinton problem. Oh, we should have gone to Wisconsin. Wait, what? We did? Uh-huh. You know, they weren't spending time in the Philly suburbs. They were spending time in Santa Barbara, California. They were running in places where the race was already over, and they were ignoring places where the race was still going on. And it's a game of small numbers. And so pushing people into states that are fairly low expense and fairly high return is a really smart play. So that 15-state play, the Electoral College play, that's the only game in town. The second is the election is a referendum on Donald Trump. All re-election campaigns, whether it's dog catcher or president, are a referendum on the incumbent. It's a question you're asking, do you want this guy for 4 more years or someone else? It's the only game in town. That referendum on Donald Trump does not come down to whether you have a health care plan that's 600 pages long or 100 pages long. It doesn't come down to having, honestly, any policy at all. Donald Trump's policy fit on a trucker hat. Barack Obama's policy, hope and change, fit on a poster. Americans tell pollsters all the time, I'm interested in policy. I want to know what his plans are to do this or that. In focus groups and polling, we call that lying out your ass. Because American voters consistently tell you they want to talk about policy, and they vote based on things that are in their lizard brain. They vote based on fear. They vote based on love. They vote based on celebrity. They don't vote on, well, you know, on paragraph 714 of Elizabeth Warren's plan on how we're going to recalibrate Social Security billing. They don't do that. They don't focus on it. I love policy nerds. I love them. In campaigns over the years, I've hired many of them, and bless their nerdy little hearts, they just sit there and they type all day. And you sort of put policy out as this kabuki dance to show that you're serious, but voters are shallow. Most of them are not thinking through complex multivariate policy options. They're thinking about, am I scared of this guy or that guy?
Okay. It was good. A little disappointing, but all right, I'll take it. So I have a question.
They elected Donald Trump. Do you really have that much faith in them?
So who do you think is the candidate who's best to beat Donald Trump?
I say this a lot, and I really mean it. I'm not trying to pick the Democratic nominee. I don't care what policies they're going to pursue down the line. I just want them to pick somebody who won't get beaten in 44 states. And whether that's Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden, it's got to be the person who makes the race into a referendum on Donald Trump and can consistently take the fight to Trump and never blink and never back down and never have a moment where they feel shame or fear or that it's too rough or that it's too tough or that they think for a moment that the other side will show decency or mercy or pity or kindness. It's got to be somebody who is tough enough to do this job. Now, I have some, if I was still wearing my evil Republican hat.
Oh, yeah, good. Let's hear that.
I would be waking up every morning praying for Bernie Sanders. Because if I was still doing what I used to do, I would make Bernie Sanders into the greatest comic opera villain of all time. He's an 80-year-old crazy socialist from Vermont who basically just had a heart attack. If you think that they took Hillary Clinton and made her into a caricature of who she really was, wait till they get a hold of Bernie Sanders. I think he has a lot more trouble against a Biden who is goofy, but voters will tell you in focus groups, yeah, he's goofy, he's kind of weird, but he's fundamentally decent. They don't fear him. I think Warren is probably tapped out as a candidate, as good as she's gotten better than I ever thought she could be, but I think she's kind of reached the top of her performance level, and Bernie is dismantling her right now, and so I don't think she'll survive it, but you never get the perfect candidate. To quote my friend Donald Rumsfeld, you go to war with the army you have, not the one that you want. And in this case, who do I want? I want Barack Obama 3.0, but you don't get him. And that's the problem for the Democrats that I outline in the book. You've got to be very careful about telling voters everything you want to do unless you have a powerful generational candidate. Barack Obama was a once-in-a-lifetime level candidate. And every Republican who was serious about it looked at Barack Obama when he started making those speeches and went, oh, shit. We are done. Because he was the greatest natural politician and connector of the media age. Bill Clinton was the last great organic politician, wheeler-dealer kind of guy of our age. And anybody in here think that there's a Bill Clinton or a Barack Obama in this field right now for the Democrats? There's not. I wish it were otherwise, because Donald Trump has one great gift. He is a master of the reality TV game. And that reality TV game that's going to play out would reward a generationally powerful candidate, a truly charismatic Democratic candidate. But right now, the field is not comprised of Barack Obamas. So they're going to have to be very careful. There's very little margin for error because of that.
I'm getting depressed. I'm a little upset. Democrats want to fall in love, right?
That is a truism of politics, that Democrats want to fall in love and Republicans just want to get to the goal line.
Right.
But look, there are some things you should be optimistic about. Donald Trump is an endless supply. He's the human gaffe machine of all time. Karma catches up with crappy people eventually. And the guy eats like 25 pounds of KFC a week and guzzles down magnums of gravy. I mean, we may get lucky at some point.
All right, so what advice would you have for Democrats who are here, who are listening to you today? What could they do?
What Democrats can do in places where the election is decided is to make sure that your folks, look, social contact is incredibly valuable in politics. And in 2008, Barack Obama discovered that when they started applying data science to politics, you need to be talking to everyone you know in other places about what you know of Donald Trump. I mean, the story of how New Yorkers really view him, because America has a sort of mythological thing about New York in their heads. And they love to hate it, and they hate to love it. And they have this idea that Donald Trump was this pinnacle of New York society and pinnacle of New York business, when we all know that this guy is a clown who couldn't get a table at the worst restaurant in town. And I said, I had a quote in my first book. I have a friend who's a hedge fund guy, moderate Republican. And at one point, I went to him in August of 15, and I said, dude, this is bad. Jeb or Marco's never going to make it. Trump's going to spend his own billions. And my friend looks back and goes, wait a minute. He goes, I am a billionaire. Donald Trump is not a billionaire. Donald Trump has never been a billionaire. Donald Trump is a clown living on credit. And that blew me away, because even I, who was a fairly sophisticated consumer of opposition research, didn't bother to dig through. Peeling back the illusion of Trump to everyone you know is really important. Advocating for, and if you can manage to go volunteer in a swing state, if you can manage to go walk, knock doors, do whatever you can, that's important. And, Pennsylvania is right down the road. That's going to be one of the key battlefields this year. And hitting doors, even if you can only do it for a weekend, it actually matters a lot. And whoever the candidate is, whoever the nominee is, they're going to have a very steep hill to climb. And not everybody can go and spend 2 weeks in Pennsylvania or knock, 500 doors. Sharing things on social media has become a part of the currency of this deal. And being engaged and active in what has become like the primary new sphere of our political discourse on the hellscape that is Twitter and Facebook has become something that's important for people to do, to shoot down lies and to shoot down fake stories and to do the things that are now the modern day equivalent of door knocking and canvassing.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the Lincoln Project? Okay, he doesn't. No. All right, yes, I think you should.
I'll give you 5 minutes on the Lincoln Project. So there are a handful of us, and I like to joke that you could have sat us around a table at a Waffle House as the remnants of the old Republican Party. and most all of us started out with George Bush 41 when we were young, bright-eyed idealists, and we've all been we've either banished ourselves or been expelled from the world of Republican politics, because what's there today isn't about limited government or individual liberty or loyalty to the Constitution. It's a personality cult based around one man. And fortunately or unfortunately, there's a group of us, me, Steve Schmidt, John Weaver, Reed Galen, a few other guys, who were the architects in some ways of the machinery that Donald Trump stole from us. The car he stole to go joyriding in. And I don't mean anything about the ideological side of it. I just mean the technical, political stuff. Some people happen to think we're pretty damn good at doing negative ads on television, and writing some good, compelling messages, and talking to Republicans, even if it's a game of small numbers, to win back some of those votes. So we launched about 10 days ago, and we went after one of the targets that we view as important in this thing, which is the evangelicals who support Donald Trump blindly. So we did an ad called The MAGA Church, a play on the mega church line, which has made the president very, very angry, and his evangelical friends extremely angry. I am predicting that this Sunday there will be some hellfire brought down on me in a variety of aluminum-sided religious institutions around the country. Today we went after Cory Gardner in Colorado, who is a guy who should know better. Cory would be, on paper, a moderate Republican, but he is doing his best to polish Donald Trump's shoes every day and back Mitch McConnell up on blocking testimony. So we went after him today. We launched our first ad on him today, and there will be a series of them going after vulnerable Republicans, basically saying, you either do the right thing, or the people are going to find somebody who can. It was a big jump to say that we're going to do our best to take down Donald Trump. And you know what? We're going to work our hardest. We've got a lot of skills. I'm sort of the Liam Neeson character of a very special set of skills. But we'll see how we're going to see how it turns out. But none of us are going to leave this fight till the very end, till the last dog dies.
Sounds good. All right.
We're gonna rook Molly into being part of the game.
That's right. As a Democrat, they asked me if I was an independent or a Democrat, and I was like, Democrat.
What are you, a good one?
Will you just talk a little bit about why, what can you just give, people are always like, they're not really, these Republicans aren't really on our side. They're not really, with George, people are always saying George Conway, he's working a grift. Will you talk about that for a minute? That criticism that you sometimes.
Well, let me address one of those criticisms that Democrats sometimes say about, well, why are you doing this? You're just in this for the money. I had a New York Times #1 bestseller last year. Every penny I made on that was rounding error from what I could have made on one congressional race or one state Senate race, to say nothing of a presidential. It was a good business. I gave it up. I gave it up because, God, F me, but the country was more important. And I could have shut my mouth, and every one of us could have shut our mouths and just gone in the background and done the minimum thing of saying, oh yeah, Trump's a... Could have kept our incomes, could have kept our businesses, could have kept our very happy practice of going out and causing trouble. Really, honestly, being a political consultant, you work about 5 months every 2 years. It's not really the hardest job in the world. But it was more important to take a position and take a stand, because the risk factor that Donald Trump presents to this country is more important than, as I say, my ideological predicates or preferences. And no, I am not an evangelical. I'm not one of these social conservative types. I'm more of a, national security and individual liberty conservative.
You're becoming a Democrat. So. No, I'm just kidding. No. Just kidding. Just a little. I'm not kidding. Conservative Democrat. Is a center.
There used to be guys like Scoop Jackson who were conservative Democrats. There used to be a very wide spectrum of ideological viewpoints, even inside the Democratic Party. and there used to be moderate and liberal Republicans. Now, there are still, because, I live in the world of numbers and math and polling and data science. Most Democrats outside the coastal areas of the country still are moderate Democrats. They are not, they're not trying to get the aristos up into the tumbril to take them to the guillotine. They're not so far left that they would be unrecognizable to, or right that they'd be unrecognizable to you, but they're also not burn it all down. They're not, they're not looking for sweeping structural change in the world. They're looking for security and moderation in a lot of spaces. But in the Republican Party, there is no ideological baseline in the GOP anymore. They're all just Trump. It's all it's about. There's no, look, we are spending money as, like drunken socialists, as someone said to me today, in this country. Trump has produced record deficits, record debt. The bill will come due. There is no such thing as magical free money. There's no modern monetary theory where Donald Trump gets to do a $2 trillion tax cut and trillion-dollar deficits every year without an eventual economic consequence. The recession that's coming is going to be brutal. And so there's nothing in the GOP that says anymore we've got to be fiscally disciplined. It was never very good at it anyway, to be honest. And there's nothing in the GOP right now that believes in anything other than the aggrandizement of Donald Trump. It's not. That's not a political party. That's a cult.
All right. I think we're sort of supposed to go to questions now. Wait. Oh no, I have 5 minutes to ask more questions. Ask more Wilson questions. All right. Regime change in China. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Boxers are.
What is the question you don't ever get asked, but you would like to be asked? Go. This is just cheating. It's called cheating. When's the question? What's
the question I never get asked but would like to be asked? I think people. I'd like to be asked more often. Like, how did you do it? There's a lot of demonology about me and people like me. They gerrymandered, or they did voter suppression, or they did this or that magical thing. I think I'd like to be asked more often, like, how did you really do it?
Yeah.
How we really did it, how we really did these things, was we found great candidates who were socially and culturally like the people in the district and the states they were going to run in. And we ran nuts and bolts campaigns. We did so much of it isn't, oh God, I shouldn't say this. So much of it isn't like the magical evil ad like I would come up with. So much of it is blocking and tackling and basic 101 door knocking politics. Get your guy on the phone every day to make donor calls to raise $500 a time from people in your neighborhood and your community. Get the guy to have a walk plan where he goes out and wears out his shoes every day for 6 or 10 weeks in the campaign cycle to go and convince people he cares about them and gives a shit about them. The magic of politics isn't the brilliant speech or the brilliant ad often. It's the door knocking. It's the work. It's a process thing, and you've got to be willing to go do that work. And that includes presidents. That includes guys who need to be willing to go out. Donald Trump set a really terrible example. Because you know what Bill Clinton did to win? He went to New Hampshire and pounded doors so he would come in third to declare victory. And, Barack Obama did rope lines and walk lines and just worked the business of politics. You may hate George W. Bush, but that guy would sit in a room and talk to every single person in that room until they felt like he was their best damn friend. And, that's the question that's a separate book, and it's not as exciting as, the big dramatic fight of our time. But politics is about interpersonal connection. And politics is about, reaching out and finding people. And we're a lot better at finding them now because we live in the age of, digital voter profiles. But there's still a lot of work to be done about it. And a lot of that personal connection has to do with being able to articulate who and what you are and what you believe in.
And then also running a Green Party candidate, right?
Oh, yeah. By the way, if you want to know a trick, a lot of the times when you see a swing district and there's a Republican and a Democrat pretty evenly matched, and then a Green Party candidate gets in the race, I hired them. So, I mean, and it's not illegal to go out and find somebody and go, hey, I want you to run on the Green Party line, and, you know, we'll take care of all the details. And frankly, and I say this in the book, the Democrats are out of their damn minds if they don't go to Arizona, Nevada, and Texas and put a ballot line of the build the wall, MAGA, shoot them, Mexican crossing the border, thieves, murderers, and rapists party. Because there would be a 2 or 3% lunatic fringe that would go, I'm going to vote for the MAGA wall party. Yeah. That's Donald Trump. Because again, voters are not all that sophisticated. A lot of them are not paying that much attention. That sort of shenanigan, if Democrats wake up and go, I can't believe anyone would suggest such an outrageous proposal. That just defies, that spits on our democracy. If the bad guys are doing bad shit, you better be ready to do bad shit. And I'm not saying break the law. I'm saying become law adjacent.
No.
Rick, who in the Democratic leadership do you really want to have read this book? You know, the head of the Democratic National Party, Schumer.
I'd like the messaging people in the campaigns to read it. I'd love the candidates to read it. Nancy Pelosi doesn't need a lot of help from me. She's running a pretty good game right now. I wish to God Chuck Schumer would read it, because Chuck Schumer gets rolled by Mitch McConnell like a guy who just jumped off the pumpkin truck. And it's just terrible to watch. It's awful. But what I really like I really like to read this are the Democratic speechwriters and ad makers and message makers for the campaigns. Because a lot of this is what would terrify me if I was still on the Republican side of this equation. I write the messages that would terrify me if I heard a Democrat delivering them. I tell them how to express the things that they believe in a way that doesn't scare the shit out of the average voter out there who's not ideologically hot. And you know, I think it's got a broad audience, in part because the first half of the book is a warning to everybody of how much worse it can get. I project forward a lot of how the Trumps can spend 4 more years and then more years after that wrecking this country in a fundamental way. So I think there's a lot of utility in this book for a lot of different parts of the campaign side.
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. For me, one of the elephants in the room that you haven't mentioned yet is Bloomberg. And so this is kind of a 3-part question. I mean, I'm very thankful to him for the money that he put to help flip the house. And he's a real billionaire times X, times 50, times whatever. And I see it would be a tough thing for him to actually get the nomination unless he were to pick somebody like Stacey Abrams. I don't know. I still don't know how he would get the nomination. But how do you see this playing out with him? Would you work for him, since he says that he's throwing money. He's got a lot of money and he's throwing money. Would you work for him? Have you worked for him? If that isn't too indiscreet of a question. And I guess that's it.
So here's my regret about Michael Bloomberg. For the 5 or 6 highly competitive Republican Senate races Mitch McConnell needs to defend this year, he's planning to raise about $200 million. Mike Bloomberg will burn $200 million on a bonfire between now and Super Tuesday. Easy. Probably even close to $300 million. Taking the Senate is an insurance policy. I'd love to see Mike Bloomberg put $100 million into voter registration in the 15 key swing states and a data project to go out and target those Obama-Trump voters. He may be at this point, but that takes massive resources and a real commitment, and it's something that I have a long hesitation about vanity campaigns. I think Bloomberg has a ceiling. I think he's probably already approaching that ceiling right now, that 15% or so that the spend has allowed him to get to. But at some point, there is a throttle in people's minds where they stop watching the ad, where they stop processing the ad in their head. I am heartened by the fact that he says whoever wins, he's going to keep his infrastructure together. And thank goodness. You know why? Because the Democratic Party, I would not trust them to organize a 2-car motorcade. Tom Perez is probably the worst party chairman of either party I've seen in decades, and I've seen some shit party chairman on both sides. And it's astounding how weak Perez is as a chairman and how little control he's had over this process, because the great gift would have been to winnow the field earlier and get it down to 6 or 7 candidates. You still have a very big, diverse field to fight through, but this clown car, 22 people on the stage, you can't do it. So I think Mike's going to have a massive impact in the organizing space. I hope he keeps his commitment to doing all the things that he says he's going to do to help, defeat Trump. I think there would have been a more linear way to get there than putting yourself in as a candidate. Mike is. I'm out of the business at this point, of that side of the business. Mike and I disagree ideologically on some things. Look, if I thought he was going to be the guy who could take Trump out most effectively, and I don't have a logical reason for this, but my gut tells me that Mike has some deficits that will not be that money alone can't repair. There's.
So who hired Jill Stein?
His name rhymes with Vladimir Putin.
And I have a question. Is Tulsi Gabbard the new Jill Stein?
Tulsi Gabbard's Jill Stein with better hair.
So I know that there are Republicans who text you and talk to you.
There are.
And you hear all their secrets.
I used to hear more.
Yeah.
Look, when the house got blown out, a lot of the people that were talking to me, who had basically given up on life anyway, were gone. I still have a few folks that call me and do the Republican father confessor thing, and then I put the phone down and scream in my backyard like, I cannot believe you.
I would sleep a lot better at night if I knew you were talking to some Democrats. Are you talking to any Democrats who are listening to you?
Yes.
My question is, what happens to the Republicans after Trump? Because I personally think there's going to be a big hell to pay, and that there's going to be a big power vacuum as well. And I actually see it almost even getting worse when that happens.
Look, Trumpism doesn't scale. And all these guys who abandon everything else they said they stood for, they can't go back. Let's say tomorrow Donald Trump drops dead of a heart attack. Inshallah. Let's say tomorrow he drops dead of a heart attack. And Paul Ryan has to run for president. He's screwed, okay? He's done. He can't say, I'm going to run to limit the scope and power of government. Because the MAGAs, they love expanding government as long as that expanded government is catching brown people crossing the border. They love expanded government as long as it's to do things that pay off Donald Trump's friends in the coal industry. They've lost their ideological predicate. So I think there will be a reset. I think there's a space in our politics for a party that is about controlling the scope and power of government in the lives of individuals. I think there's a space in our politics for people who are legitimately fiscally conservative and who believe that the government has to have some constraint on its spending. That doesn't exist right now. Now, it's going to be a very long road back to create such a party. I don't think it's going to be the Republican Party. I think the brand is permanently destroyed. I think the brand is permanently done. It's like saying, the Nazi Party really had some good ideas about... It doesn't work.
Would you recommend some of the Democratic candidates going on Fox?
Sure. Absolutely. Listen, Fox, the genius of Roger Ailes was that Roger understood how to build a product that Americans wanted that was outside of the traditional media space of New York and Los Angeles media. He understood there was a desire for the service of a television network that addressed the grievances of a lot of people who felt like the coasts were elitist looking down on them. Roger created that. Now, what do we know about those people, though? Yeah, of course, it's raw fear. What do we know about that network, though? It is twice the viewers of everything else, and there's a reason for that. They produce a shallow, salty, tasty product, and the people out there in middle America like that shallow, salty, tasty product. You know what? I shouldn't eat fried chicken, but I would eat Popeye's fried chicken sandwiches every damn day if I could. They're salty and tasty. That's what they produced. They're not about news. They were never about news. They were always about giving people a place to like feel like their grievances were being heard. That's why the merger of Trump and Fox was so cataclysmic. However, going on Fox for Democratic candidates gets to an audience, at least for shock value, because they hear nothing else. They hear nothing else at all. They will not hear a single word out of these debates other than that is processed for them by Fox and by the creative team at Fox. And that debate will be turned from something on health care policy and Medicare for all into the commies are coming to kill your doctor and make you go to Citizens Health Center 47 in the Manhattan Oblast. You know.
You talked about fringe third-party candidates. Is there room for running sacrificial moderate Republicans like Kasich in Ohio just to spoil?
You know, there may be the ballot access problem right now with the state parties. Many of the state parties get a vote in who the nominee or in who gets the ballot line. So you could do it. I will tell you, we tried to do it in 90 days for Evan McMullen, and it was too hard. We didn't have the legal juice to put it together in time. I think you may see some third-party sacrificial candidates out there. I think you may see some independent, moderate candidates out there in some key places that could help in that regard.
Yeah, you talked about process for elections, like what you used to do for a living, and campaign strategy, but it seems like a lot of the process at all that
You're
we're
right.
still running scams. There was WikiLeaks.
Sure.
It's except that there's a legitimate process for free, but
look,
why leave honest election will leave with Ukraine.
That's one of the things. That's one of the messages, frankly, that the Russians are really pushing right now, is that the election is totally illegitimate. That is a terrifying prospect, because there's an argument to be made that this election will be even more deeply influenced by foreign powers, and not just Russia, but Russia primarily. I mean, that's the key bono question, is Russia will benefit more than anybody else out of a broken election here. And I think there's a great fear that Americans will not view this as a legitimate election. They will not view this as an honest election. And there's a reason for that. The election is being manipulated. The deep fakes, I write about the deep fake stuff in this book. You're going to see some deep fake scandals this year that are going to blow your damn mind. You're going to see online manipulation that makes 2016 look like, the AOL dial-up tone.
Hi. So a question, you said that the idea is to sort of tell the voters in middle America who Trump really is. But what about the people, how do you convince people who say, I know who he is, but we've been losing the cultural war for so long?
You don't convince those people. Look, the God Squad is lost. They are gone. It's done. You are not going to move evangelicals. The reason we hit the shock and awe button with evangelicals this week, and will continue to do so, is there is a small fraction of them in a few swing states that are squishy now on Trump, that have reached the limit. Like, how many judges are worth it? Is it worth having a fundamentally amoral man, a fundamentally unchristian man in office for the trade-off of executive orders and judges? Because look, executive orders, even Trump supporters are realizing those are ephemeral. You know, Republicans used to lose their minds over Barack Obama and executive orders. I used to say all the time, I don't think it's wise for the president, for Obama, to govern by executive order because someday a Republican will be in office and they will flip all that on its head. And that's exactly what happened. Now, Trump voters are starting to realize that. And Trump's communicating that to them, saying they'll overturn my executive orders. They'll undo my executive orders. Now, vast majority of the executive orders are insane crony capitalist giveaways to the coal industry and Trump friends and family. But, you know, those things were a motivating factor. But the hard God squad, they're not moving at this point. And, you know, we focus group tested some stuff about a year ago, and their sense of social and cultural inferiority, even though Protestant Christians are the plurality of the religious population in this country, they feel like they are the tiny minority that is being crushed under the feet of the godless masses from the coastal liberal elites. And that is a message he's used very well with them, very effectively.
I just have a question. Growing up, my father was a Republican. Actually, both my parents were Republicans. What the hell happened to Republicans? I mean, it's besides money. I mean, I understand that there's money involved and the RNC is now being controlled by him. But before he won, right? Let's just say, what the hell happened? They can't all have taken that much NRA money.
Well, I can tell you what happened. In 1996, Roger Ailes talked Rupert Murdoch into giving him about $60 million to start a new cable television network. It became the most successful cable television network in history. It became the normative force shaping the Republican Party. That normative force became oppositional. It became narrowly tailored to tell people that they were hated by the liberal elite, that it was a choice between good and evil. It narrowed the political space of the Republican intellectual discussion further and further and further. And as things like the Tea Party rose up after 2008, it narrowed it further and further. It became less important to do things and more important to oppose things. And oh, they're just chicken shit. They're afraid of Donald. No, they're afraid. No, it's not the money. It has nothing to do with the money. McConnell's power comes from money. Trump's power comes from fear. They are terrified of him. They almost all. And look, there are a few yahoos, Jim Jordan and those idiots. There's a handful of yahoos that are real Trumpers. Almost all of them hate Donald Trump with the fire of 1,000 suns. They think he's a jackass. However, they love three things on this earth. They love their power, they love holding their office, and they love being alive. And they are terrified of Trump's horde. I have a friend, he's a member of Congress, and I tell the story in the first book. Has a town hall meeting in February. I think it's February or March of 17, not long after the inauguration. Gets a couple questions. The guy stands up and says, "Are you going to be with Mr. Trump 100% of the time?" And he gives the answer that is the true answer. He goes, "Well, you know, I've supported Donald Trump, and I'm going to do everything I can to help forward his agenda, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we, can work together with the president. But I'm your representative, and if something he proposes is bad for our district, I'm going to fight for the district. If something he wants is bad for you, I'm going to fight for you." Well, he answers a few more questions. By the time he gets off stage, his wife and kids have been doxxed on Facebook. There are death threats to his kids' school because he didn't support Mr. Trump 100% of the time. These people are goddamn crazy, okay? And he knows it. He knows the fear that is generated in the minds of a congressman when someone calls up and says, "Hey, I know what elementary school your kids go to." This is a thugocracy that this guy is running. These guys are terrified of him. They are terrified that he'll say something about them and they'll get a primary opponent and lose their position. They're terrified some cuckoo is going to come up like a Caesar Sayoc who could actually build a bomb and get them. These guys live in absolute terror of Donald Trump. They do not believe in him. They do not love him. Like I said, a few of the jackasses do. A few of the edge cases do. You know who really doesn't? This is a great piece of knowledge. Matt Gaetz doesn't love Donald Trump. Matt Gaetz he is an opportunist of the highest order. I never said that. He is a hustler. He is an opportunist. He's a game player. He thought he was going to ride that pony. And he doesn't believe in shit. He's like Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is a nihilist. He believes in nothing. This is a show for them. But the vast majority of these guys are not the hustlers. They're not the true believers. Most of them are just absolutely fear. I call it FOMT, fear of mean tweets. And it is a constant in their lives. Okay, sure.
Could you just talk about guns? I mean,
sure.
Talk about guns.
I don't carry a gun in New York City, but after 3.5 years of death threats and of people coming to my house and threatening my kids and threatening my wife and threatening my dogs and threatening to burn my house down, I am a concealed carry permit holder, and I am a very capable firearms handler, and I carry a gun. I mean, I've had people walk up to me in grocery stores and wait outside the TV studio where I do my hits in Florida, and so. And, you know, and the old joke about, you know, the 911 takes 10 or 11 minutes. How long do you think that crazy person's going to wait? You know, it is something that I've had to become very accustomed to. And, you know, in 30 years of doing politics against the Democrats, I had the occasional jackass leave a nasty message on my voicemail. Now I get death threats with, like, pictures of people who've taken pictures from the road of my house, like, oh, I could see your wife through there and draw a you know, a bullseye on it. You know, that kind of crazy stuff is not really. You reassess your security after a while. Now, on the subject of guns, the Democrats have a article of faith that gun control is the most popular, wonderful thing, and everybody wants gun control right now. And my God, I can't tell you how many elections I've beaten Democrats in on that one issue. Because you know what? Every white male Democrat outside of New York and Boston and Washington, they're gun guys. They hunt. Go to Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota and Pennsylvania and Ohio, and every white male Democrat, I can find them. I can identify them on the voter file. I can convince them. Democrats don't understand guns. They don't understand it, and yeah. Good. Now, I will tell you, I have killed coyotes that were eating my dogs with AR-15s. So that's another story for another day.
Okay, last question here.
Sorry. Yeah. It would require people to watch PBS. I mean, that unfortunately, that's the hard truth of it is Americans want to be entertained. News is a narrow product for a limited audience. There are about 50 million Americans who watch news to watch news. There are about 35 million more Americans who watch news to watch Fox. But it's not easy to convince Americans to have considered policy discussions. It's just not how they're wired anymore.
Thank you so much, Molly. And thank